Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in this world. My name is Gijs Janssen van Doorn. I'm a technology evangelist at Zerto, and today we're going to talk about Zerto's journal and how we can help you solve for those many backup use cases you might have, and also talk a little bit about what we have coming in the near future to help you even more with those backup use cases. Now, before we start, I quickly want to talk about our IT resilience platform. Zerto's IT resilience platform basically converges different technologies into one single, simple, scalable platform. And those technologies are backup, disaster recovery, and cloud mobility. And when we look at the components of that platform, you can see how we solve for those use cases. The core of Zerto's IT resilience platform is continuous data protection. This is the engine which moves data from A to B, and this also allows you to rewind workloads back in time for those recovery use cases. So we use continuous data replication to move that data from A to B, or from A to B and A to C, because we also support one-to-many replication. And what it is, it's continuous block level replication. It's using a universal replication engine, meaning that the engine is the same no matter what platform you use within Zerto, whether it's VMware, Hyper-V, or one of our clouds. Um, so moving the data from A to B is done in a universal way. Now, the way we capture the data on those specific platforms and how we store them on those specific platforms depends on the platform that you use. In cloud, we use cost-efficient object-level storage. In VMware, we use VMDKs, and Hyper-V, we use VHDX files. So we're really storing it in its the native format of the platform you use. Now, whenever we move blocks from A to B, we place them in a journal, and a journal allows you to do point-in-time recovery. Um, and the way we use journaling technology, we actually allow you to rewind back to how workloads or VMs or files were seconds ago. And more about that in one of the next slides. To protect your applications, we offer application consistency grouping. So we don't just protect VMs, we protect the actual application. Applications nowadays consist of multiple VMs, and application consistency grouping allow you to not only protect but also recover those applications as a single entity. Now, moving data from A to B and storing it in a journal, and a journal is limited to 30 days right now. But to make sure that you are also covered for those more compliance use cases, where we also added long-term retention to the continuous data protection engine. Now, moving data from A to B is wonderful, but now we also want to use that data that is now located in the target site, the B site. That's why we added orchestration and automation. And these are those workflows that allow you to move workloads, perform failovers, or do non-disruptive failover tests. This is all built into the platform. Of course, we also have APIs allowing you to integrate with third-party applications or any other orchestration tools you might already use. So we have the engine, the CDP engine. We basically have the steering wheel. We can go left and right using our multi-cloud workflows. Now we also want to add something like a GPS navigation system or a computer in your car that allows you to see your fuel economy, for example. Now, analytics and controls give you insight across your entire infrastructure, whether you're running multi-site, multi-cloud, using public cloud, private cloud, doesn't really matter. And the analytics platform gives you insight in your current protection status. You can do historical reporting on your protection status, so you can prove that you've achieved your SLA over the last couple of months. And this is all integrated into this platform. Zerto Analytics is actually delivered as a software as a service platform, and that gives you the ability to just log into a simple, easy to use, intelligent dashboard and see exactly what the protection status is, how much resources are going from left to right. This really gives you insight into your multi-cloud protection, but also resource consumption. Now, what I want to do today is specifically zoom into three of those components of that continuous data protection engine. being the replication, the journal-based recovery, and the application consistency grouping, and showing you how important that is and how it can help you recover data and recover VMs or files or even applications. And this really allows you to solve for many of those recovery use cases, which you were now looking at backup for. And actually, when using Zerto, you can now use this journal-based recovery to recover from those scenarios. Now, continuous data replication, we're a software-only platform. So the only thing we add to your environment are software components. Now, this is a typical VMware to VMware scenario, but we could also do VMware to Hyper-V, VMware to public cloud, Hyper-V to Azure. It doesn't matter because everything we do is cross-platform. We offer bi-directional protection and bi-directional mobility. But let's focus specifically on the VMware part of it. Now, the first thing we need to add to an environment is the Zerto Virtual Manager. Basically, a Windows application you can install on a Windows server, and this ties or connects to the vCenter environment. So you install it, it's done in a couple of minutes. Then you point it to your vCenter server, and what we'll actually do is do an auto discover of all the resources you have available in your vCenter environment. Now, we install a ZVM on both sides because in case of one side failure, you want to use the UI on the other ZVM to recover or to perform a failover. Now, as soon as the ZVM is installed, we'll start installing what I like to call the worker bees of the solution, virtual replication appliances. These are the appliances that actually do the heavy lifting. They will perform the block level replication, continuous replication. They have built-in compression, they have built-in bandwidth throttling, and what they actually are is they are a scale-out architecture. So that means a virtual replication appliance is installed on each and every hypervisor host in your environment and therefore scales with your environment. So it's complete block level replication. We don't use any type of snapshots. We don't have any agent, which means that there's no impact to your production performance. Now, whenever we replicate those blocks, we don't place them directly into a replica disk or actually store them in a journal. And this journal allows us to go back in time. This is where those checkpoints reside. As you can see, the journal is on the target side, and this offers you that continuous data protection. Now, if we zoom into the journal and compare that to, let's say, legacy technology like taking storage snapshots or VM snapshots or maybe even backups. Now, when using those type of periodic ways of storing data, you'll take a snapshot, let's say, every 4 hours or maybe every 6 hours. And backups are even taken once every 24 hours and sometimes once or like twice every 24 hours. Now, the journal offers you a continuous protection, meaning that we'll store every change that happens in your environment and we'll create checkpoints, which are those points in time you can recover to every few seconds. That means I can go back to 5 seconds ago, 10 seconds ago, up to 30 days. And this allows you to, let's say, when ransomware hits you at 5:26, we can go back to 1 minute before it actually hit you. And we can do that for VMs, entire applications, files, or even entire data centers. This is what it will look like in our interface. So you'll see the list of all the checkpoints that are available for anything that you've selected to recover. It could be a virtual protection group, could be a VM, or even could be a file. And as you can see, this really gives you the granularity to recover and to really easily recover to basically any point in time. And this really protects you against those logical failures like database corruption or ransomware attacks. And as you can see, you can really go back to seconds ago. You don't have to go back to that latest backup that happened maybe 12 hours ago. And these checkpoints are created across multiple VMs. So if you group, and that's actually on the next slide already, if you group those VMs, you can actually start protecting applications instead of only single VMs. And this really gives you the ability to recover multi-VM applications consistently down to the second. Now, besides the ability to automatically create checkpoints, that's what Zerto does. That's automatic. You don't need to schedule anything. You can also create manual checkpoints. Let's say a few seconds before you did an application upgrade that touched multiple VMs, you can save a checkpoint of all those VMs, so you'll make sure that all those VMs are protected from a consistent point in time, so you can recover to that consistent point in time. Now, the way that works is we use virtual protection groups. And if we look at applications nowadays, applications don't consist of one VM. It's multiple VMs. It's a database server. It's an indexing server. There might be two applications that have some kind of connection or dependency with each other. So it's really important that we protect those applications consistently, but also recover them consistently. And what we do with virtual protection groups is we basically group all those VMs that make up an application or an application chain, into virtual protection groups and protecting them as one entity. And you can create multiple VPGs, and you can even set SLAs on top of those VPGs. Now, those VPGs maintain write order fidelity and consistency across all the VMs that are in that group. That means that if I recover that group to a specific point in time, all the VMs in that specific virtual protection group are recovered to exactly the same point in time. And while we're protecting those VMs, it doesn't matter where they are located. They could be on different clusters in the vCenter, they could be on different storage arrays, they could be on different data stores, doesn't matter. And on top of these VPGs, we can even pre-configure recovery settings. So if we click to recover a virtual protection group, we'll make sure that all the VMs are booted in the right order. We'll make sure that they are booted in the right network. We'll even give you the ability to change IP addresses on recovery. We'll support anything that's in your virtual environment, whether it's vMotion, storage DRS, you name it. Because it doesn't matter where the VM moves to, because we are integrated into the hypervisor level. Now, let's talk about some of the recovery use cases with the Zerto. And I'll specifically talk about ransomware, like accidental file deletion, and even object level recovery. Let's start with ransomware. The file server is up and running, serving files to its end users as it is on a daily basis. But then at 1 minute past 5, ransomware creeps into the server and starts encrypting all those files. Now, because you have that continuous block level replication, you are continuously protecting this VM using Zerto, and you have the journal, you can actually simply rewind the server to how it was 5 seconds before the ransomware hit you and resume business as usual. Now, let's say only a specific folder was encrypted. You can simply rewind the folder to how it was 5 seconds before it actually happened with only a few clicks. Now, this actually happened to one of our customers, unfortunately. Now, the unfortunate part is where they didn't have Zerto. Now they're fortunate enough to have Zerto, because without Zerto, they actually had to go back to tape, and this actually happened. They had to go back to a tape of an entire file server at one of their many manufacturing facilities, and they had to suffer almost 12 hours of data loss. But the most concerning part is because it was on tape, because it was slow, because it was really complex, the time to recover took them almost 2 weeks. If you compare that to Zerto and continuous data protection, we could actually recover a couple of directories within 10 minutes, and the data loss was only 10 seconds. So this is a huge impact to whatever recovery scenario you have, because with Zerto, you can now rewind to how something was a few seconds ago, minimizing the impact, minimizing the data loss. And even just simple things like a user accidentally deleting a file. Simply rewind and resume. Go back in time, download that file, and send it to the user, or recover it to its original home folder. Now, for those familiar with Zerto and our interface, it's really easy to recover files. And everything we do, we try to keep as simple as possible. So what we do right here is I'll actually show you through the power of PowerPoint, a demo that can never fail, the file level recovery. So what we go is we go to Actions, which is located in the bottom left of the screen, you'll simply select Restore File. Now, you can pick a VM you want to actually recover that file from. You select a point in time. You can go back 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 30 seconds, 30 days if you want to. We then select the disk you actually want to recover the files from. We simply click Start Mount. And what actually happens in the background is we don't start a VM. We'll simply start mounting the disk and present you the file structure or the file system structure as it is on that disk. You simply browse through the files, you select the files or folders you want, simply download those files, and you're done. Now, this works for Windows file systems, Linux file systems will support LVM as well. So this gives you the ability to really recover those files at seconds granularity. But we'll even go further than that. So let's say I've got a SQL server or an Exchange server and I want to start recovering not the entire SQL server, but specific tables or specific emails. Now we have a feature called Failover Test, and this allows you to start a specific application in an isolated bubble. So what we actually do is we click Failover Tests, we select a point in time. Now this has no impact to production. You can boot it in an isolated network. There's no impact to protection. There's no impact to production performance. And we still give you that seconds of granularity because the seconds of granularity is the same no matter what you recover. And because you're still protected, there's no at-risk period. The checkpoint creation still continues in the backend. So what you can actually do now is start that entire application even with their if they need Active Directory servers, if they need other supporting services, you can just simply start them in an isolated bubble and then use the built-in tools to actually recover that data. If you start the SQL management suite, you can simply export the data. With Exchange 2019, we have a tool called eDiscovery, and eDiscovery just allows you to find those files or those emails that you actually want to recover and simply export them into a PSD format. Now, this uses the vendor's built-in technology. You'll get support from the vendor because you're just using their application. And this is a really powerful way to still recover whatever you need, whether it's SQL objects or a chain object or for whatever application you use, but still maintain seconds of granularity. And starting an entire application is only a few minutes work, and you'll have access to that entire application, including all its dependencies if needed. Now, the journal goes back to up to 30 days, maximum of 30 days. But what if I want to store my data longer than that? So let's talk a little bit specifically about long-term retention. Now, if we look at our current release, which is Zerto Virtual Replication 6.5, we have the following features already available. So we're using enhanced scale-out architecture, not only for our replication using the virtual replication appliances, but what we've done in 6.5 is we've added those engines, those components to actually do backup and recovery, backup and restore into the virtual replication appliance. So we now have a built-in scale-out architecture also for those long-term retention use cases. Currently, we support NFS for secondary storage targets, meaning that I can offload my points in time to NFS storage, to cost-effective storage, and the retention policies are a maximum of 1 year. Now, if you want to go and start using it, we also have the capability to start integrating with Microsoft Azure Databox Edge. Databox Edge was actually announced at Microsoft Ignite in September, if I'm not mistaken, and this gives you a really fast and scalable way to start using both on-premise backups, but storing them in the cloud, because basically you get a device that has a 20 terabyte on-premise cache and automatically tiers it off to an Azure storage account using an encrypted connection. And the beauty of it is that Edge, a V application, actually supports NFS. So you'd just be using like a generic NFS share to write the data to. Now for the exciting news. In Q1 next year, or let's say March, April timeframe, Zerto will release Zerto 7. And this is adding new long-term retention capabilities to it. What we've announced during ZertoCon is a new concept in data protection. the Elastic Journal. And the Elastic Journal will basically combine the power of the journal we already have with long-term retention. And this really gives you the ability to balance your storage need, locations, and policies. You can set a policy on your virtual protection groups or your VMs for as long as you want to keep the data, and we'll make sure that we'll store it in the most cost-effective way. Now, if you look at how we store it, there's a short-term retention up to 30 days. This is the journal we have right now. And of course, on top of that, we have the long-term retention. Now, the short-term retention is typically stored on production-grade storage because we really want to use that for those fast recovery use cases where you have to have like RTOs as low as possible, RPOs as low as possible, really giving you that granularity in seconds for those disaster recovery or ransomware recovery use cases. On top of that, we're now adding long-term retention. Long-term retention basically allows you to offload those points in time in the journal to a cost-effective secondary storage target. We're looking at supporting NFS, SMB, and native S3 API as those more generic protocols. But we're also looking at deep integration with HPE Store Once, for example, and using their native Catalyst API. We're also talking to Exagrid to start using their appliances as well. And of course, we'll also support cloud-based targets like Azure Backup Vault or AWS S3. Now, every point in time you want to recover from using long-term retention will be a full copy, will be presented as a synthetic full copy, and will allow you to recover VMs, files, or folders directly from that long-term retention. Actually, we even allow you to recover those virtual protection groups from the long-term retention storage. Now, if we look at it from an architecture point of view, you'll see that it's actually using the CDP engine we already have. Because what we're doing right now, every block that's being generated by a VM, we're replicating to the target side, storing in a journal. And this is the short-term retention. Now, what we'll actually start doing is, on the target side, we'll start maintaining what we call a persistent bitmap that basically tracks all the change blocks that happened from the last time I moved a point in time to the long-term retention until now. So what it's actually doing is creating those change block tracking copies that we can then copy to the repository. So what we do is we copy all the blocks only needed for that point in time to the offsite repository. It could be cloud, could be an NFS, disk store, locally. So what this means is we actually start using the target side instead of the production side. And if you look at backup nowadays, it hasn't changed from, let's say, the last 35 years. Of course, we're storing it on different media. The way we grab it from the production side is maybe different. We now have snapshots and other technologies. But the pure basics of it, taking the data from the production systems, moving it to a secondary storage layer, has not changed. What we're doing right now is introducing a new way of storing your data and a new way of recovering your data, because we're not taking the copy from the production side. We're taking it from the target side, having no production impact. We don't have production impact while we're doing CDP protection, our continuous block level replication. We won't have any impact on the production side if we take those long-term retention copies. And this means backup windows are a thing of the past. You don't care when the backup is taken because it doesn't matter. It doesn't have impact to your production environment. So how do we write that data? It's actually quite easy for the people that are familiar with Zerto, are familiar with the way we operate. There's, on the target side, there is the VRA, there's the journal, there's a target disk. Now, what we added is an additional component to that virtual replication appliance called the DSS, the data streaming service or data stream service. And this actually reads the bitmap, knows exactly which blocks to write, and starts writing those blocks to the repository. If we want to recover, we know exactly what the file structure needs to be. What we're actually using is what we call a disk objects map. So we know exactly which objects will a certain disk consists from. So what we'll do is we'll simply read the blocks we need to read through the DSS, use the VRA to write it to the restore disk, and then use the ZVM and its built-in automation orchestration to create the VM. Let's say we want to recover a VM, create the VM, and boot that VM. Now, it's great that we're storing data for longer term now. So what's really important is that you need to find the data that you actually want to recover. You need to find the data which you have stored on your long-term retention. So what we're adding to the product is index and search. And index and search will be indexing and searching files and folders and give you the ability to find them across the short-term and long-term retention, whether it's in the cloud or local. And we'll start using that new unstructured way, the scalable way of building that architecture. So it's built according to Zerto standards, easy, scalable, and fast. Now, as soon as you have found the data, you need to recover it. So what we're also looking at supplying you in Zerto 7 are the data protection workflows to allow you to recover that data. We now have workflows built in for failover test move operations. We have a simple file recovery workflow in there as well. So what we're now adding is unified data protection workflows that allow you to simply recover a file, whether it's located in long-term retention or short-term retention storage. So this is just a quick example of how this should work. You need to recover a file. You simply search for the file using index and search. You'll be shown the results across all the targets, across that Elastic journal. You simply select a point in time you want to recover the data from, the recovery orchestration will take place, and the file is recovered. Really simple, really fast. So if you're looking at Zerto 7, we'll offer you the Elastic Journal, short-term retention, long-term retention. Short-term retention typically solving almost 90% of your use cases. You don't want to recover a database as it was 2 years ago. You'll be recovering a database as it was 2 years ago because of some kind of compliance or legal issue. So this is why we're adding those long-term retention targets to it as well. Index and search on top of that Elastic Journal, allowing you to find the data that you're looking for. And of course, those new unified data protection workflows allowing you to really easy recover those files, whether they were from 7 seconds ago or 7 years ago. So how does Zerto change the way you're doing backup now? So we're offering agentless continuous data protection without any performance impact. It's really easy to install, it's completely non-disruptive, and we're using a scaled-out architecture. And as you can see, we're actually using that same scaled-out architecture that we're right now using for recovery, for the continuous data replication, to also store the data on the long-term retention targets. We offer application consistency grouping. No matter where your VMs are located, any storage device, any cluster, any data store, any host, and will allow you to consistently protect and recover those applications. And the application consistency is maintained across any target, whether it's a short-term retention target, long-term retention, secondary storage target. Even if that application was protected 3 years ago, it will still be able to be recovered consistently. We offer continuous journal-based protection. It's granular at site, application, VM, or file level. You can recover to any point in time, whether it's 5 seconds ago, 7 seconds ago, up to 7 years ago. I say 7 years because of Zerto 7, 7 seconds, 7 years with Zerto 7. Could be 10 years, could be 100 years if you want to, while still offering you the seconds of granularity in that short-term retention journal at any scale. This all combined into one really easy to use IT resilience platform. Basically replacing backup, disaster recovery, any type of cloud migration solution you might have. And we have orchestration and automation built in with native continuous data protection, all in one simple and easy to use platform. Now, this concludes my session for today. Many thanks for joining. A lot of people joined today. It's great to see all of you joining. I see many questions in the Q&A panel. What I will do is any question I won't be able to answer, I'll answer by email. Don't hesitate to reach out to us in case you have any questions. Please enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.